The desert sky turned dark in seconds, even though the sun still burned high above. The wind shifted. It wasn't natural. The soldiers guarding the old border station felt it too. Their hands gripped weapons tighter. But no alarms had sounded. No enemy was seen yet. Still, something was coming. Captain Rowan stood shirtless on the watch platform, rusted armor beside his feet. His once legendary armor was covered in dents, scorch marks, and time. It hadn't seen war in years. Now it would again. He could feel it in his bones. He had retired from battle long ago, but they had found him. She came to him the night before, the alien girl. Blue skin, silver hair, eyes that glowed softly even in darkness. Her hands were bound, her knees bruised, and her lips cracked from thirst. She had spoken only one word, with trembling voice. Help. Then she collapsed in front of his old home. No one knew who she was, but Rowan recognized the markings on her shoulder. Royal blood. A family crest that hadn't been seen in centuries. She was no common refugee. She was important, maybe even sacred, to the alien tribes who once ruled half the outer worlds. That same night, a message arrived. Not through comms, but carved in the sand by drones. Trade the girl for peace, or war will come at dawn. The drones vanished after leaving. The message. The local soldiers wanted to hand her over. Rowan said nothing. He stared at the armor in the corner of his hut. In the morning, the sky tore open. Drop pods fell like thunder. Alien war beasts and masked warriors marched across the plains. There, leader rode a massive four-legged beast, its mouth full of knives. He spoke only once. Give her back, or everyone dies. Rowan stepped forward, still bare-chested. They laughed at him. One human, one girl, against an army. The commander of the outpost hesitated, then ordered his men to prepare the girl for transfer. They put her in chains, though she did not fight. Her eyes looked at Rowan one last time before they dragged her away. Rowan walked back to his hut and placed one hand on the rusted armor. The metal felt cold, heavier than he remembered. It wasn't just armor, it was memory. It was reputation. It was the reason many had lived, and the reason some had died. He lifted it with one hand, and it hummed to life. Outside, the alien warriors prepared a platform for the trade. Drums beat slowly. Smoke from signal fires filled the air. The chained girl stood silently at the center, her head down. Soldiers waited for Rowan to step forward. When he did, no one expected what came next. He wore the armor again. The rust had not dulled its power. The scratches had not weakened its name. As Rowan stepped into the clearing, the ground beneath him seemed to tremble. The alien leader narrowed his eyes and gripped his weapon tighter. Then Rowan spoke, his voice calm. I don't trade people. Not for peace, not for war. He removed the helmet and tossed it to the ground. Then he reached behind his back and took off the armor piece by piece. With every drop of metal to the dirt, silence grew deeper. Until finally, he stood bare once more, and in that silence, the alien girl stood taller. Her chains slipped off like dust. Her eyes glowed bright as stars. The alien soldiers, one by one, lowered their heads. Then their knees. In front of Rowan. In front of her. The desert held its breath. They were not kneeling in surrender. They were kneeling in recognition. The girl stood in the center of the circle, no longer in chains. Her hands were free. Her back was straight. Her silver hair moved slightly with the wind. The armor lay behind her in the dust, piece by piece. The crowd of alien warriors around her remained kneeling without command. Rowan watched them carefully. He didn't speak. His body was covered in scars, old and fresh. The alien girl turned her head slightly and met his eyes. Something passed between them. Not words, not fear. Just understanding. The outpost commander whispered, "What's happening?" But no one answered. The humans kept their weapons ready, unsure if the kneeling warriors would rise and attack. Rowan raised one hand slowly, signaling them to hold. An older alien stepped forward from the crowd. His armor was old, but his shoulders were still strong. He touched the ground with his forehead and spoke in his native tongue. The girl translated softly, without turning her head. "They say the armor is not rust. It is sacred ash from the burning sky wars." Rowan's face remained unreadable. He looked at the armor lying behind the girl. For him, it had been a tool. For them, it was something more. A symbol, a weapon, a myth. And now, a reason to kneel. The alien leader who had once demanded the trade stood still. He had not knelt. His beast shifted beneath him, sensing the change in air. The leader looked down at the kneeling warriors, then at the girl, then at Rowan. His hand twitched near his blade. Rowan did not move. His voice finally broke the silence. "You asked for trade. I say no, but now they choose who they follow." He took one step forward. The ground cracked slightly under his heel. The beast growled but did not attack. The girl raised her hand. Slowly, she pointed at the alien leader. Her voice was calm. "He is not the voice of my people. He is the one who betrayed the Sky Oath. He sold my name for power." Gasps came from the kneeling warriors. Several looked up at her, shock in their eyes. One dropped his blade to the ground. Another removed his helmet. The truth spread faster than fire. The girl kept speaking. "I was not captured by your enemies. I was sold by your commander. To humans for weapons. But they gave me water. They gave me rest. And one of them wore the armor of the Ash Bearer." Rowan's jaw clenched slightly. He had never cared about old legends or sacred names. He had only done what felt right. But now the girl's words were building something around him. Something bigger than battle, the alien leader shouted. His words were cruel and sharp. He accused the girl of lies. He said the armor was dead. He screamed that Rowan was nothing but a tired human. His beast took 2 angry steps forward. Before anyone else moved, the girl stepped in front of Rowan. She stood between the beast and the man who had saved her. She raised both her arms, palms open. "No more lies. No more trades. We decide today." Then she dropped to one knee and lowered her head. "This is the one I follow," she said. The aliens gasped again. One by one, the kneeling warriors stood not to fight, but to move beside her, and kneel again beside her. The alien leader pulled his blade in rage. But no one followed. His beast snarled. His army was no longer his. He looked around and saw no loyalty, only silence. Only respect given to a human and a girl who once had nothing. Rowan stepped forward again. "Go," he said. His voice was quiet, but the order rang across the air. The leader hesitated, then turned his beast. He left the field without a word. No one followed him, and when the dust settled, the warriors stayed kneeling around Rowan and the girl, not as prisoners, but as witnesses. The wind carried the silence across the dunes. The alien army, once united under a false leader, now waited with bowed heads. The girl stood beside Rowan, her dress marked with sand but her presence glowing stronger than before. The sun watched. From above, casting long shadows over the broken ground, some of the kneeling warriors began to rise. Not in rebellion, not in protest. They stood one by one and walked toward the center where the rusted armor lay. Each touched a piece of it with respect, then touched their own chest. It was not a ritual they were taught. It came from instinct. Rowan remained still. He watched them carefully. Their weapons were still strapped to their backs, but there was no tension in the air now. Only recognition. Something had shifted in their hearts. He didn't fully understand what it meant, but he accepted it. The girl looked at each warrior as they came forward. Her expression was calm, but her eyes searched their faces for truth. No one dared lie to her. She had spoken openly before them, risking death. That kind of bravery left a mark deeper than blood. A younger alien, no older than 20 cycles, stepped forward with shaking hands. He removed a small medallion from his neck and offered it to the girl. She took it gently and held it tight in her palm. It was a symbol of his clan. A clan that once served her family. She nodded to him, and he stepped back into the line. More warriors followed. They offered what little they had: scraps of cloth, tribal beads, broken weapon hilts, small things. But they meant everything to those who gave them. The outpost commander finally stepped forward. He had seen enough. His voice was unsure but steady. "We can't hold this line. There are too many. Should we retreat?" he asked. Rowan turned to face him, his voice clear. "No," Rowan replied. "They're not enemies anymore." His eyes scanned the desert, now filled with kneeling aliens and offerings. They came for war, but they found something older. Something real. The humans around him still held their weapons tight. They had trained to expect betrayal. But the longer they watched, the less they feared. None of the aliens reached for their weapons. None raised their voices. Even the wind began to feel softer. The girl knelt once again beside the armor. She placed her palm flat on its chestplate and closed her eyes. "This armor belongs to the one who stood when others fell. That is what they remember. That is why they kneel." Rowan looked at his hands. They were not young anymore. They had held weapons, held wounds, held dying friends. He had never cared for honor. He had only cared for survival. But now he saw the meaning others placed in his past. The armor began to hum slightly, faintly. A whisper in metal. The girl's eyes snapped open. "It still remembers," she said. "The metal carries memory. That's why they called you Ash-bearer. You wore it after the burning. After the last scream of the war." He didn't know what to say. He remembered the war. But he never knew the stories others told. He never asked what they whispered after. He left the field. Now it was clear those whispers became legend, not by his choice, but by theirs. A scout ran in from the ridge, his voice urgent. "Another force is approaching. 10 war beasts, marked with red dust symbols. Not part of the group here. Unknown allegiance." Rowan's face turned serious. The girl stood quickly and faced the warriors. "You followed me because of the past, but now I ask you to rise for the future. Stand with him, or everything ends again." One by one, the aliens stood and drew their blades, not toward Rowan, but toward the rising dust on the horizon, and this time, they stood with the human, not against him. The second force approached from the west, kicking dust high into the sky. The war beasts led the march, their armor red and their mouths filled with steel teeth. Behind them marched soldiers in jagged metal suits, different from those already kneeling. Their banners showed a broken circle and a blade through it. The girl's face grew tense. "That mark belongs to the Scorch faction," she said. "They serve no one. They want only ruin. Even their own kind fear them." Rowan stepped forward and picked up a piece of his old armor. He strapped it to his chest without a word. The humming from the metal returned. It was faint, but steady. He strapped another piece to his arm. The silence around him deepened. The alien warriors beside him shifted into formation. No order was spoken. They moved by instinct, as if they had trained together for years. Humans on the ridge aimed their rifles. The girl stood between both sides and raised her hand for calm. "We will not strike first," she said. "But if they charge, we defend together. The first of the Scorch." Riders broke formation. He rode ahead of the others, black smoke trailing behind his beast. He held no flag. Just a jagged blade soaked in something dark. He stopped only when he was within shouting distance. "You kneel to a human?" the rider called out. "You disgrace." Your blood. Stand aside and give us the girl. Or you all burn with him. No one answered. The air held still. The girl stepped forward. I am not yours. I was never yours. I will never be yours, she shouted back. Her voice echoed like a bell. Her words struck deeper than any weapon. The Scorch Rider sneered. He raised his hand. Behind him, the other beasts began to growl. Weapons were lifted. Fire containers were rolled forward. The sand beneath them began to darken with shadow. Rowan turned his head slightly. Now we strike, he said. The moment the words left his mouth, the warriors charged. Human and alien side by side. Rowan ran without a helmet, the glowing plates of his armor catching sunlight. The girl remained behind, arms raised again, not in surrender, but as a call. A call to something deep. The sand trembled. A pulse moved under the ground. The sky darkened for a moment. As the two forces clashed, a strange sound rang out, a deep hum that came from the ground and from the armor on Rowan's chest. The Scorch warriors fought without mercy. But the unity between the defenders was stronger than fear. Each time a blade struck, another answered. Each time a warrior fell, another stepped forward. Rowan moved like a storm. His arms blocked steel, his fists shattered masks. The armor guided him, like it remembered how to fight. One blow sent a Scorch beast rolling backward, its rider screaming into the dust. The girl walked toward the fallen rider. She held a thin staff taken from a gift pile. With one strike, she knocked the blade from his hand. He tried to speak. She didn't let him. She turned her back to him and walked away. The rest of the Scorch force began to fall apart. They had expected chaos. They found unity. They had expected weakness. They found something stronger. Fear crept into their ranks. Some dropped their weapons. Others turned their beasts and fled. One final warrior raised his weapon to strike Rowan from behind. Before he could swing, one of the alien warriors, an old one with cracked tusks, tackled him to the ground and ended the threat with a single blow. The battle was over in minutes. The dust cleared, and silence returned to the valley. But now silence meant peace. The battlefield was quiet. The bodies of the Scorch faction lay scattered across the sand. The sun had begun to lower, casting a golden light across the wounded earth. No one celebrated. There were no cheers, only breathing, only survival. Rowan stood with blood on his chest plate. It wasn't his. The armor had protected him again. It had taken hits that would have broken bone. Around him, warriors checked the wounded and tended to their fallen. But no one had touched the armor he left behind earlier. The girl walked to Rowan. Her dress was torn at the bottom, but her steps were strong. She looked into his eyes. They saw you fight, she said. But more than that, they saw you protect. That is what matters now. Rowan nodded once. He didn't need praise. He only wanted truth. And the truth was written across every face. They no longer saw him as an outsider, not as a human, not as a relic, but as something they would follow. The outpost commander approached, wiping dust from his face. We sent a signal to command, he said. They're asking what just happened here. I don't even know how to answer. Rowan looked at the horizon. Tell them peace happened, he replied. But make sure they understand who brought it. The girl stepped forward. She lifted her hand, and the gathered warriors turned their eyes toward her. We were once broken by lies, divided by greed, but today we stood together. And today we choose a different path. She pointed at the rusted armor still lying in the sand. This armor once walked through fire, and yet it still stands. That is not rust. That is memory. And we carry it forward. One warrior stepped forward and placed a banner into the ground. It was not a war banner. It was white with no symbols, a clean start, a silent vow. The others followed, planting weapons into the sand, blade first. As a sign of peace, Rowan sat near a broken crate and drank water slowly. His muscles ached. His heart did not. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a weapon. He felt like a man again. The girl sat beside him. "They will come again," she said. "Others who want to control, who want to divide. This won't be the last battle." "I know," Rowan replied. "But they'll find something waiting that they didn't expect." The sky turned orange. Fires were lit not for war, but for warmth. Food was shared between human and alien. The line between them faded with each passing hour. Where once stood an army, now sat a circle of survivors. Stories were told. Some of the alien warriors spoke of the ash-bearer, not knowing Rowan sat among them. They described his battles, his last stand, and the moment he vanished from history. The girl smiled as she listened. Rowan didn't speak during the stories. He simply watched the stars begin to appear. The armor rested beside him, silent but heavy, not in weight, but in meaning. It had carried more than just his body. It had carried faith. A child approached him, alien in form but curious in eyes. The child touched the armor and asked, "Can I be like you?" Rowan looked at the child and gave the smallest nod. "You can be better," he said. The girl stood once more. "We need a home," she said. "Not just shelter. A true place to build, to grow. This place will be that seed." And in that moment, the valley was no longer just sand and blood. It was the beginning of something new. A place where legends laid down their weapons and rose as people. Asterisk, the morning light spread across the valley, turning dust into gold. The old battlefield looked peaceful now. The blood had dried. The weapons remained planted in the earth like forgotten seeds. But something new was growing here. The humans and aliens had not returned to their cities. They had stayed. They built tents together, shared tools, shared silence. They no longer needed translators for every word. Their actions spoke clearly enough. Rowan helped raise a support beam while two alien warriors tied ropes around it. His muscles ached, but he didn't stop. The armor lay nearby, untouched, resting under a sheet. It was no longer needed, yet no one dared move it far. The girl walked among the workers. She gave calm instructions. Her voice carried a strange authority. She was not crowned. She wore no badge, but those around her listened. Not because they feared her, because they trusted her. An older human soldier approached Rowan with a datapad. "Command wants to speak with you," he said. "They're confused why we haven't returned. They're sending a team to assess the situation." Rowan took the pad but didn't answer right away. His eyes watched the people working. "Tell them to come," he finally said. "But if they come to control, they'll leave disappointed." The soldier hesitated, then nodded. He understood. This wasn't a mission anymore. It was something else, something deeper, bigger than ranks or orders. A quiet foundation had been set. Later that day, a scout returned from the southern ridge. His breathing was sharp. "Riders approaching," he said. "Not Scorch, another tribe. Unknown colors. They look armed." The girl called the warriors to form a loose wall at the edge of the camp. No blades were drawn yet. Rowan stood beside her, his arms folded. The armor remained where it was. If war returned, it would be his again. But not until then. The new arrivals slowed as they neared. Their leader rode a white creature with 6 legs and dark horns. He was tall, silent, and wore armor that shimmered like stone. When he stopped, he raised both hands. "I bring no war," the stranger said. "I bring the last piece of the oath." Everyone looked confused. The girl stepped forward. "What oath do you speak of?" she asked. Her voice held no fear, only challenge. The stranger dismounted. He opened a cloth bundle and revealed a broken piece of an ancient crown. The edges were scorched. The markings old. This was lost when the stars fell. It belonged to the one who refused the throne. Now we return it to the one who made the others kneel. His eyes looked at Rowan, every head turned. Rowan didn't speak. He didn't move. But the wind shifted slightly, brushing his hair like a whisper. The girl walked to the crown piece and lifted it with care. "This is a symbol," she said. "But not of rule, of unity, of second chances. It doesn't make anyone a king. It makes all of us responsible." The stranger nodded once. "Then we offer ourselves not as followers, but as builders. We carry the skills of healing and farming. We ask for soil, not control." Rowan stepped forward at last. His voice was steady. "You are welcome. But this place has no throne, no master. Only memory and hope." And in that moment, the broken crown was not a treasure, it was a promise. Peace of the past, offered to the future, without chains, without fear. The village rose day by day, not with machines, but with hands. Alien and human worked shoulder to shoulder. They built homes from metal scraps and desert stone. They shared water, food, and stories around small fires. Children played near the armor. They never touched it, but they circled it like it was a statue, a reminder, a question. Some called it the shell of a legend. Others called it proof that peace could stand stronger than war. The girl had begun teaching. She gathered groups each morning and showed them old ways of healing, of growing food in hard land, of speaking across dialects without tension. People listened. Even the oldest sat quietly to learn. Rowan watched from a distance. He rarely spoke now. He spent his mornings walking the ridges, watching the wind, studying the patterns of dust. He didn't feel like a leader. He didn't want to be one. But still, they looked to him. One evening, the outpost commander returned with a small team from Earth Command. They wore crisp uniforms and walked with tight steps. Their faces were unreadable. Their hands never strayed far from their weapons. They stood in the middle of the village and looked around. Then one of them said, "We expected a war camp." "Not this." Rowan stepped forward slowly. "What you see is what was left after war. What we chose to build is peace." The Earth officers walked past the armor without glancing at it. They examined tools, storage rooms, even spoke with a few alien builders. Then the lead officer turned to the girl and asked, "Who's in charge here?" She looked at Rowan but did not answer. Instead, she said, "We don't have a ruler, we have voices. All of them matter. Even yours, if you stay to listen." That answer didn't satisfy them. One officer frowned. "This is still Earth territory. We'll need to bring this under formal control. Chain of command. Law and structure." A murmur rose among the villagers, not anger, just disbelief. The unity they built was not born from orders. It had grown from choice, from scars, from broken pasts finding common ground. Rowan looked the officer in the eyes. "No one here serves under threat. If your law means chains, it won't hold here. If it means protection, then stay and protect." The officers stepped away to talk. Privately, their voices were low, but tension spread like fire. The warriors from both sides began watching closely. Hands moved near blades, eyes narrowed. Peace held, but barely. The girl moved between them. She raised her staff and struck the ground once. The sound echoed through the valley. "We won't trade one chain for another. We've bled enough to earn our own name." A child brought a bowl of water to one of the officers. The officer stared at it, then took it with slow hands. He drank, wiped his mouth, and said nothing. But something in his face changed. That night, the Earth team remained. They did not issue commands. They did not send reports. They sat near the fires and listened to the stories. They saw things they had never trained for. Unity without a flag. Peace without a threat. Rowan sat beside the armor again. He ran his hand along the edge of the chestplate. "I carried you into too many wars," he said. But maybe your weight was always meant to hold something bigger. The armor made no sound. But the silence that followed carried weight. Not of war, but of promise. The next sunrise came quietly. A warm wind passed over the valley. Dust rose in thin curls and carried the scent of firewood, earth, and something new. Growth had begun beneath the surface. Tents had turned into homes. Paths were being carved into the sand. Seeds from the alien tribes were planted alongside earth crops. In silence, life had chosen to begin again. The girl stood before a map drawn into the sand. Around her, both humans and aliens discussed routes, supply trails, and safe zones. No one argued. Each voice added something. Every voice was heard. Rowan watched from the shade of a half-built tower. His arms were crossed and his eyes calm. He was not tired, but at peace. The armor remained near the center of the village. Under a glass shelter built with care, the Earth team had not left, but they had changed. Their reports now described cooperation, not rebellion. They had stopped asking who was in charge. They started asking how they could help. The girl approached Rowan with a simple wooden box in her hands. "We found something buried by the ridge," she said. "You should see it." Rowan opened the box slowly. Inside was a medallion covered in dust. The surface had strange markings, older than both human and alien language. "What is it?" he asked. She smiled gently. "The first agreement, carved during the first contact, before war, before fear. It was meant to bind two worlds. But it was lost when the fighting started." Rowan held it carefully. The weight was small, but it pulled at him deeply. "And now it's found again," he said. They brought the medallion to the village square. The people gathered around as the girl held it high. "Before swords, there were words," she said. "And those words were not kept. But we can write them again." A new pillar was placed beside the armor, made of desert stone and star metal. It stood tall and unmarked. The medallion was placed at its center. It didn't shine, it didn't glow. But everyone stared at it with hope. One by one, villagers touched the pillar. Not as a worship, but as a promise. Children placed their hands beside warriors. Old scars rested beside soft palms. No words were needed for what it meant. That night, the fires burned brighter than ever. Songs were sung in two languages. Dances mixed different rhythms. Food came from every corner of the valley. Laughter rose into the sky without shame. The girl stood beside the pillar and spoke softly. "Let them come. Let those who still want war arrive. But let them see this first. Let them see what happens when we stop obeying fear." Rowan placed one final piece of his armor at the base of the pillar. The chest plate, the one that had taken the first shot. The one that had led the charge. The one that had made them kneel. "I don't need it anymore," he said, "because the people here don't follow armor. They follow each other." And with that, he stepped back and became one of them. Not above, not beyond, just one voice, among many.